What they're really doing, they want to spoon feed information to the journalists, and that will be their story. That's not journalism.
Buckle up, because the girls are fighting again, and the Trump administration isn't even getting along with Fox News at this point. We're going to break this down and much more in this short form video. The latest media drama is what we're going to talk about, because the Secretary of War, as he now calls himself, but the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, is instituting new rules, new restrictions that journalists have to agree to in order to get access to the Pentagon, to keep their Pentagon press passes. And they're almost all, with I believe only the exception of One American News, a far-right fringe network, not agreeing to do this. They're saying, absolutely not, we won't do it. I'm going to explain both sides. We're going to go over the fact that even Fox News is breaking with Trump on this, and then I'll give you my take. First, here's some coverage from CNN summing up the controversy.
Sites like this.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Are almost never seen at the Pentagon anymore. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's team has stopped holding regular Pentagon briefings, and they've started posting video on social media instead.
I'm Pentagon Press Secretary Kingsley Wilson, and welcome to the DoW's weekly situation report.
Hegseth seems to want reporters to toe the same line and repeat the same talking points. This year, his press office has expelled many news outlets from longtime Pentagon workspaces and barred reporters from many parts of the building without an escort. And now they're going even further.
We're trying to make sure national security is respected, and we're proud of the policy.
What Hegseth calls common sense, press advocates call an unprecedented attack. Hegseth is championing new rules for press passes that, quote, appear to violate the First Amendment, according to the Association for Pentagon Beat Reporters. Hegseth, bedeviled by leaks, is trying to stop reporters from talking to sources.
Time and time again, classified information is leaked or peddled for political purposes to try to make the president look bad.
Media lawyers say the new rules for accessing the Pentagon would criminalize journalism. So today, in a rare show of solidarity, the country's 5 biggest TV networks said no. CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, even Fox News, all saying, quote, the policy is without precedent and threatens core journalistic protections. Dozens of other outlets also refusing to sign the papers, which means they'll lose access this week. Hegseth waving goodbye with these emojis on social media. But as the networks all said today, quote, we will continue to cover the U.S. military, as each of our organizations has done for many decades, upholding the principles of a free and independent press.
So a couple things that I think are interesting and important to note here. One is that the Pentagon is just not really doing press briefings like basically all administrations do. And that's not great, because then there are far less opportunities for reporters from across the political spectrum to question them or demand answers or specifics on certain topics. And then all we get are these pre-planned video PR releases. That is, when they did promise to be the most transparent Pentagon in American history, that's not that. Then there's this aspect of these new restrictions, which we will get into in more detail. But it should be a good starting sign that something is wrong, that even Fox News and Newsmax are refusing to agree to this. If these were reasonable restrictions, you would think Newsmax in particular, which is a super pro-Trump network, would agree to them. But no, they're still a media network. They still want to actually do reporting. And some of these restrictions they would have to agree to keep their Pentagon press passes directly go against a journalist's ability to do their job, as we'll get into. But first, I want to show you kind of the narrative that Pete Hegseth and his allies and employees are taking on social media. Here's his post on X. Pentagon access is a privilege, not a right. So here is Department of War's press credentialing for dummies. Press no longer roams free. Press must wear visible badge. Credentialed press are no longer permitted to solicit criminal acts. Done. Pentagon now has the same rules as every U.S. military installation. So there are a number of problems with this. One, the Pentagon, journalists already can't roam free. There are parts of the Pentagon that are off limits and are classified, and journalists can't go there. But when you think of the Pentagon, you might be thinking like, oh, this is just a secretive military base. No, it's a massive, massive building with a Taco Bell and a CVS. So yes, lots of journalists have access and can walk around a lot of the building because it's essentially close to public. It's not all top secret. And then the press already do wear visible badges. So that's kind of a non sequitur or just a not super contentious point. But if all they were doing was limiting where the press can go in the Pentagon or requiring them to wear, I don't know, new badges or more visible badges, I don't think most people would have an issue with this. The problem comes from this third prong. Now, Pete Hegseth describes it as credentialed press no longer permitted to solicit criminal acts. That is not an accurate description of his policies, and he's trying to distill them all down to 3 bullet points, when in fact there's over 17 pages, the documents that they have to agree to with restrictions, what they're actually not allowed to do. As Lara Seligman, who is, I believe, a correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, posted on X, the document we were asked to sign equates asking DoD personnel to disclose information, even unclassified, that has not been approved by an authorizing official, to asking them to commit a crime. So in essence, basic journalism equals criminal activity. That is an unacceptable violation of the First Amendment. I agree, because what Pete Hegseth is doing is saying you literally can't ask any DoD employee for information, even unclassified information. So we're not talking about classified information that isn't approved for a press release by the press office or whatever. So at that point, all reporting that relies on any sort of non-official approved information or talking point goes out the window. So many of the most important reported stories revealing malfeasance at the Pentagon, revealing that the military, the federal government was lying to us, where they get some sort of information, sometimes classified, sometimes not, is out the window. So when the Biden administration botched the Afghanistan withdrawal, all the media would be able to report on is what the official talking heads were saying. No, right? You want them to be able to report on things that military personnel are telling them about what's really going on, even if it's not all official and approved. This is basic reporting. This happens all the time. And they can't just demand that people never report anything they don't approve in order to access the Pentagon. I do think it'll be challenged under the First Amendment and struck down, but even if it isn't, you can't expect any actual journalist or media organization to agree to that. It's telling that the only one I've seen that has is One America News, which, I mean, that just tells you they're doing PR and propaganda for the administration. They're not doing any critical reporting of any kind. Now, what's really telling is that this was even panned by Bret Baier and the former 4-star General Jack Keane on Fox News. They went into some detail bashing this policy, and I think it was particularly interesting to hear from both of them, especially because Bret is a highly respected journalist. He covered the Pentagon for many years, and he's like, no, this is unacceptable. And then Jack Keane was a high-ranking general, and even he thinks this is ridiculous and not at all representative of how he thinks the Pentagon should interact with the press. So take a listen to what they had to say.
I covered the Pentagon for 6.5 years. I covered the White House for 4 years. I covered the Pentagon when you were there.
Yeah, right.
And we knew you don't walk into the tank, and the classified areas are off limits. We obviously were always trying to get the story from different elements, and there was a freedom, but everybody had badges with them. At the White House, I never walked into the Oval Office or the Situation Room. These are stipulations that essentially are changing the dynamic about how to get information and how they disseminate information.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like the whole story is being told to our viewers here. What they're really doing, they want to spoon feed information to the journalists, and that will be their story. That's not journalism. Journalism is going out and finding the story and getting all the facts to support it. And no one's going to walk in and bang on a door of a 4-star general or senior civilian policy leader in the Pentagon. I never had that, but I did have journalists chasing a story of something that was going on in the Army, and those things were legitimate. And if anything, what would frustrate us in times is we didn't beat you to it. And something bad is happening, and we're getting our act together to do it. And sometimes, well, let's wait a couple of days before we talk about that, and you guys are on it. And that's journalism.
And we know the stipulations about classified information, and if there are leaks or there are situations, there are investigations many times that lead to that.
I agree with all of these criticisms, and I think it's really insightful. I'm not really sure what it is that Pete Hegseth is so afraid of. It's already illegal, by the way, to solicit criminal acts, so they could prosecute people for doing that. What's not illegal is reporting or journalism. And while it can be very biased, of course, and leaks can be a problem, they already have the ability to crack down on leakers inside the Pentagon, the people who are doing the leaking. The journalism isn't a crime, and it can often serve as a very important watchdog and check and balance on the administration and on the government. So you have Pete Hegseth trying to turn the Pentagon press corps into basically just a bunch of parrots who repeat his press releases. It is, I think, totally inconsistent with the free press. I think it will be challenged under the First Amendment. And more importantly, I think it screams weakness. It screams that they're afraid of scrutiny, and that far from being the most transparent Pentagon in history, they're trying to stifle reporters from presenting any information that counters their narrative. And I think it, rather than projecting strength, really does seem to me to project weakness. But what do you guys think? And again, it's very telling that even Newsmax and Fox News will not agree to this, because it is simply not reasonable at all. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Hit the like button, subscribe, yada, yada, yada. Make sure that if you're interested in my longer form content, you check out my podcast, Bret vs. Everyone, where I take on social media and internet insanity in longer form. The links are in the description. You can listen on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. With that, guys, we'll be back with more content real soon.